Okay, it is 5 o'clock. Will you please rise and join me with the pledge of the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin this evening with our open forum. Is there anyone that would like to come forward at this time to address the board? Okay. Next, we have celebrating our successes, Peggy Young, Leadership Albert Lea, Freeborn County, and Riverland Community College.
This is Peggy Young. She's the instructor component for the Leadership Albert Lea. She's in her 5th year of doing that and has had a number of our staff members as well as others going through that program. She really brings a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. She also is at Riverland Community College. And bringing all that to the number of folks that are in that program every year just adds to it and ties in leadership lessons to every one of the day visits. I had mentioned at one point, Education Day is one of those. She caters her lesson to that Education Day. And then when they do the Farming Day and they go out and see those things, she's got another lesson for all of that. So it really works out well, and she does a great job.
Thank you very much. More importantly, I hope I bring a little fun to the program too. But I enjoy it. It's a great part of my job. And again, we couldn't do the program without the partnership of the Chamber and all of the industry partners and business partners that allow their employees to participate in the program, so I have to give a shout out to them too. But thank you very much. I appreciate this.
And you are on the Austin? Are you on the Austin board?
I am on the Austin School Board, yes. Don't hold that against me. Again, thank you. This is very
Well, thank you, Peggy, for all your support. I'd entertain a motion then to approve today's agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have our consent items. What are your wishes, board?
Move to approve.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the consent items, so all those in favor of approving the consent items signify by saying aye. 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 Pose same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have reports. We'll begin with Dr. Funk.
So 2 things tonight for the board. First one, we have some administrative reassignments occurring in the district. We have Johanna Thomas, who's back here right now, is currently our Halverson principal. We have, as the board knows, we have a Pathways to Success program here in Albert Lea, where we have been for a number of years now working on developing different pathways for our students, our high school students in particular, to meet their needs and be successful. And so a month or so ago, a number of us from the district went up to Alexandria, and we looked at their academy model, which has really turned their high school into different pathways for their students. And the thing they told us is you need somebody in charge to get this thing done. And so before Johanna was the principal at Halverson, she was an assistant principal at the high school for a number of years. And one of the great things she got started for us 4 or 5 years ago was the youth apprenticeship program. So she's already got some background in developing programs with community businesses for our students. And so the timing on it is really, I think it's perfect. So we're going to be doing that transition after Christmas here. Tanya Prouty, who's currently at the ALC, has 12 years of background in elementary education, mostly at Lakeview. And so she's going to be, and I think they're doing the transition this week, as a matter of fact. So she will be assuming the principal position effective January 1st. And then we've posted the ALC position, which Tanya will be vacating, and some ALC staff members and a couple of administrators will be interviewing candidates for that position on Wednesday. And we've got one internal and I think one external has applied so far for that position. So if you hear any talk about that, I just wanted to address that piece. The other thing that I wanted to really take a minute and thank our licensed staff members is we had an instructional survey that went out in early November to our mainly our teachers in the district. And one of our areas of focus this year is really trying to make change at the building level. What we can do as building leadership teams at the grade level and at the building level to really improve what's going on in our district. And so we did a survey and we asked staff, okay, where are we at as far as instruction and alignment with what we're doing with the curriculum? And the staff was very open and very honest and very candid about what they thought. And so we had a chance to review this information with all the building leaders individually, and if there was a principal and assistant principal, the three of us would sit down at the secondary level, and then I've asked them to go back and share trends with their buildings as far as what they're seeing as far as are we meeting the needs and what are we doing as far as instruction. The survey, we put a survey together. And then we sat with the principals and asked for their feedback on the survey before we even sent it out to the teachers to make sure that we were looking in the right areas. So again, I think we had great feedback, and I think this will make a positive difference. We will again survey the staff later this spring to see what if we're seeing any shifts in what's occurring. So that's my report for tonight. Questions?
So with the administrative realignment, then, are we adding a full-time administrative staff to the district?
Unlikely, because we have an internal administrative staff member who's applied for the current ALC position. So the possibility is there, but we'll know by the end of the week.
But in total positions, then, we're remaining the same?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll have school board member reports. I'm going to start with Dave this time.
I also attended the Facilities Committee meeting this morning. Thanks.
I don't believe I've attended any meetings lately, but I did substitute last week, and it was a pleasure. I'm impressed with our students. Our wrestling team is doing very well. Other than that, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Mark? Angie? Nothing report. Okay, I participated in the facilities committee meeting this morning, and also we've had 2 meetings with the LEA since our last report. So, and next we have our student board member reports. Gigi or Ella, one of you want to start?
Well, it's just finals week at the high school, so everyone's busy preparing for that. So, and I think there's a girls' basketball game tomorrow. So that's all I have.
I would just add that there's also a band and orchestra concert tonight at 7 if anybody wants to attend. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a teacher's report tonight.
I don't have a lot to report. At Hawthorne, we had our winter concert, and kids are preparing for winter break. I think Culverson had theirs as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to curriculum and instruction, next we have Jerry Bizak talking about the Europe Spring 2019 trip proposal.
All right, thanks for having me. As most of you probably know, I've done a couple trips through EF and had great success, had a lot of people, including Gigi, to go with. And so I'm proposing doing one in on spring break 2019. Tentative dates, it would be an 8-day trip, the one that I'm proposing now. What we do is fly from Minneapolis to Paris, take a bus to Normandy, cross the English Channel by ferry, and go to London, and then fly back from London to Minneapolis. Obviously, there's a lot of places you see. The big reason I want to do this one, because I know French class is taking, I believe it's like 15 people or so, this spring to France, and I know they're going to be partly in Paris, but it'll be the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Thought about doing it in, because with school ending at the end of 19, to do it almost coinciding perfectly with June 6th. My concern with that was twofold. Number one, crowds I think would be enormous, and the other thing is it's about $600 more to go because it's the peak season. And I said the only way I'd go to Paris and London with a school group is if it would be in the off season, because the crowds are, talking with a lot of different people, are crazy at that time of year. So that's why I'm proposing spring break. So obviously I would lead it. All and students grades 8 through 11 are eligible. Last time when we had 65 people go, we had a lot of returners. I don't know if that was going to happen again. I'd have to put that out there. I haven't contacted anybody about it, and EF would be the tour group I'd use. I mean, it was, the two that I've done have been totally seamless. We've had zero problems at all, other than, again, the last trip was a Q-tip stuck in an ear, but that wasn't anybody's fault, except the person with the Q-tip. So, again, why? Just travel, I think, is the best educational experience, just speaking personally and just hearing from other students. So this is the cost. It includes everything but lunches, the extra excursions. The extra excursions, I'm going to tell people, if this gets approved, that you should go Windsor Castle and Versailles. Those are pretty amazing. So, and those only add like $75, $80 to it. So, kind of a no-brainer in my opinion. Souvenirs, and then the insurance. The insurance is like $150. I tell people you should probably get it. We had I think we had 10 people that had to cancel for various reasons with the last trip, and with the insurance, they get almost all their money back. So that adds about $160 to it. However, EF will have an early sign-up, $200 off that, which, to be able, for a kid to be able to go to those places for less than $3,000 and have everything taken care of, I think it's an excellent value. And so I just put some of the pictures of some of the places that we'd go to. And myself as the history person, to be at Normandy, roughly the 75th anniversary, that would be pretty unforgettable. So that's my proposal. Any questions, concerns? That one was the, I believe that was the Conciergerie where Marie Antoinette was, I think. Notre Dame, Louvre, Versailles.
And again, it's 19, the slide said 2018,
19.
2019.
Did it say 18?
One of them did.
One of them did, my bad. Okay, my bad. 19.
So when are you seeking approval?
I was hoping
Tonight?
tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Yeah, when do the kids have to, I know there's the $200, what's the deadline on that?
So when talking to the EF rep, she said, because how I did it last 2 times, which I know I'm going to do again if it gets approved, is I contacted staff members, especially social studies, English department, hey, do you know kids that you think would benefit or would really appreciate going on a trip like this? And I got a bunch of names, and so I sent out letters to those families saying, hey, staff members think that your student would really benefit from this. So the $200 thing, when talking to her, it's looking like mid-January would be about the cutoff date for that.
Okay. So here's what I propose, that you give him tentative approval tonight, because I think did you do the paperwork side of it?
What's that?
Do you have the paperwork stuff all done that goes along with it?
Yeah, I've got, and through the website.
No, I mean for there's some stuff in policy that you got to submit.
I've
Okay, so
done that before.
So I would recommend we do tentative approval of the trip tonight, and then he'll give me the paperwork, and then we will do a consent item approval once I look through the paperwork and we're good. But that way, kids can know that we can start to get it registered and signed up.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Any questions?
You've used EF tours before then, I take it, right, Jerry?
Yeah, twice.
Are they a specialized, like, for student-type tours?
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous company, so they cater to different divisions that cater to all sorts of groups, but their big emphasis is on student travel.
What I'm getting at is, since we have Four Seasons travel in town, do you also work through them? Not saying you have to, just asking if that's been an option or not, because I've been approached on different trips by the owner over there. Always curious.
No, I have never looked at them.
And again, I think Chris Chalmers and I have had a discussion through community education, and Chris has been encouraged that if we do trips through community ed, that we talk to Four Seasons.
I had a quick question. You mentioned how teachers will kind of let you know some students they think would benefit, but it is open to all students,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
How do the other students that don't get the special letter know about it?
Yep, I advertised in school, on the growl,
Okay.
in posters. Word of mouth has been the biggest.
Okay.
I had some people like, hey, I heard about this, and it's like, okay, all right. So,
Okay, thanks.
no, don't close it off to anybody. What's the program at the high school called? Nobody took advantage of it last trip, but the year before there were a couple students. Help me out with a name. Was it? The Tiger Fund, yeah. So a few students were able to access that. I can't remember the dollar amount that was the max on that, $250. So, which is
And how about through EF? Is there a scholarship or discount available to students? No?
no,
Okay.
it's not.
I would ask a question also, has there been any thought to talk to Four Seasons at all, or?
I have not actually thought about that.
Okay.
The fact, and the reason being is that this company is very focused on the student travel, and I let the adults know that go with it. They design their programming for high school students, so.
Do they provide people to give tours at all, or?
Oh, yeah. So,
Okay.
we have somebody who is with us from the company, with us the entire trip, stay in the same hotels, on the buses, et cetera. There are offices that EF has in, I can't remember the number of European cities. And when we go to a specialized place like Versailles, then there is a specific tour guide for Versailles that goes into that information. So.
Okay, again.
I'm approval based on superintendent review.
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded to approve this upon superintendent review. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving this signify by saying aye. Aye. Pull same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we have the athletic facilities update. Mark and Afton.
Good evening. Last Wednesday night, we brought different groups together from the community to kick off, as Board Member Klatt said, the facilities task force. We had 15 people, which we had realized there are a couple meetings that conflicted, and then we're trying to work around our athletic schedules of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So as you see, there are drawings from our group, not from our group, but from the architectural firm, discussing our plans and going forward. One of the things the school board knows is we've been looking at what do we do with Jim Gustafson Field, stadium, turf, bathrooms. When we met with the group, we showed them the thought exchange that you have seen with the feedback, and we also showed them another presentation that was made to the board about the facilities. So we really wanted to get it started. We needed to start somewhere, and so our plan is to meet in January again, and at that time, hopefully we can show them some of the ideas and also get more groups involved. We're not just looking at high school, we're looking at the community, so we're looking at the youth associations, we're looking at different groups besides just athletics, band, different groups that might be out there that might be using the facilities. So I see this as yes, it's a school district facility, but used by the community. And so this morning there was also the facilities committee got together and saw this also. So we're just at the very beginning. We're looking for more people to be involved. And so if there are people that are interested, they can contact either Afton or I. So.
Like Mark said, Wednesday night, we had 15, and I know right off the bat you're like, 15, that doesn't sound like very many. Thankfully, though, we did have a wide array of those that are basically big stakeholders in something like this. We had a student that showed up. We had coaches who were able to give some valuable feedback of what they experienced, not only here in our facilities, but then also they're able to see what other facilities that they travel to offer and maybe what they don't offer. We also had parents that were there. We had a school board member that was there. And we just had a community member at large, which is a great thing because our big push is that this is a community effort. And there are so many things that are feasible with this project that could really benefit our community as a whole. We've reached out to the YMCA, the City of Albert Lea, for their collaboration because we do know that we do share facilities at times, and it's important that we not overlap the facilities that we do offer, but more so collaborate together to provide our community the needs that they have for facilities, for athletics, but like Mark said, not only for athletics, but for our marching band and for other youth programs and activities that could take place at a facility that offers running water for a bathroom and things like that. So I think overall the meeting was a great start. Many of their questions were, where do we go from here? And having a timeline. And so those are the things that we're really going to start moving on after the first of the year is getting that group together and, again, getting feedback from the community, continue to get that feedback and just get their input on what they think are good and bad and what we need to work on here within our facilities.
So a couple different things that have come up. And you've got to see these nice renderings behind us. The concerns from a, I don't know what to call it, a liability issue, policy issue. There are, I mean, the status of Hammerfield is deteriorating, the bleachers there. Currently, we are not ADA compliant like we need to be. We are not Title IX compliant with equity between boys and girls sports. And really, when Hammerfield was built in the 60s, it was built for a time where we had a football field and really boys sports utilizing it and primary one sport on the field. And so we are now in 2017. Hammer has been well utilized, and we've got a lot out of it for the past 50-some years. What I think that we are looking for from the community is support moving 50 to 100 years forward on what we can best fit and meet the needs of our school district. We've evolved quite a bit over time during that time frame. So I just want to, I'll give you a couple brief highlights for the public here. So we have nice renderings, and you can certainly come on up and take a look at them here when we're done. But the other thing that I think that came out of the facilities task force that met on Wednesday night was a discussion on gym space in the community. And, you know, I think what you have behind us right here is a beautiful rendering of what the Hammer complex could look like. The other thing that came out was we have kids practicing late into the night, 9:30, because we don't have enough gym space during the winter months within at Albert Lee. So we don't have any renderings for you as far as that, but there's also been some talk of, okay, if we do a gym space or gym someplace, and if we're looking at our elementaries, the one elementary that's in most need of a real-size gym is Halverson Elementary. And so what that would look like. So we've taken that feedback from Thought Exchange. We've had some discussions with the task force, and we've also talked to our financial folks to say, okay, because one of the big concerns out of the task force that they asked point blank was, what's this going to cost? And so if you want to pop up that the tax impact, one of the things that we get when we have a finance person as good as Lori Voles is someone who can help us manage cost within our district and potential tax impacts. So if you want to scroll up a little bit, Ashley, there. They are figuring the cost is going to be somewhere between $17 and $18 million to do the Hammer complex. If we were to add a gymnasium, that cost would be another $3 to $4 million. So you have two columns there in front of you. You have tax impact on a $17 million cost. That would be the Hammer complex by itself. And you have tax impact on a $21 million project, which would include a gymnasium. So let's just go down the $17 million column for a minute there. So if we were to go to our voters sometime this year, and we would ask them to approve a $17 million bond to move Hammer Field into the future for the next 50 years, we would be asking a $100,000 home to increase their taxes for $1. If we were to go and ask them to not only improve Hammer Field, but we were to build a new gymnasium as well, we would be $5 on a $100,000 home. And so you can see the commercial impact there, and if you look further down, you can see the ag impact as well. So how can we do this? We have debt that will be coming off the books from the high school and some other projects, and we would just be continuing with basically would be continuing with our same level of debt into the future, and yet we would be able to continue to meet the needs of our students moving forward for the next, 50 years plus. So that is the cost and really what's this going to do for us are the things. And really, we haven't gotten in too much into the project with the school board yet, but you've toured the antiquated facility at the current field house. We would be adding a number of locker rooms. So we would be able to actually host teams and have them be able to change in the locker rooms. We'd have classroom space in there for team meetings. It has an elevator in it. We have, one of the biggest complaints we have in the community is no bathroom space. We have to bring in porta potties. We have 17 stalls, I think, in the female bathrooms, not as many in the males, of course. And we also would be irrigating the fields. We would be artificial turf on the main field. And we would have a concession area, and softball would be now compliant with baseball as far as the Title IX side of things. So we'd be consistent there. We would take care of the ADA issues that currently exist. And so I think that this is something that we as a school district have a great opportunity here to set ourselves up, you know, for the next few generations here at minimal tax impact to the community. So, and we will be sharing these renderings, this information with the facilities task force, and then depending on what the direction of the board is on this, we will certainly go out and have community meetings all over town discussing the why we need to do this and the potential impact on the voters.
Okay. Any other comments, Mark or Afton?
No.
Okay. I know this is the first time some of the board has seen this. 3 of us attended the meeting this morning, and we had many of our questions answered. And so I would just open it up to see if there's any questions that anyone has.
Could you explain on the tax, why is the lower amount 18 levies and the higher amount 10 levies?
That might be a typo. Yep.
Again, we're in the preliminary stages, still analyzing it, and as it's been mentioned, there's more input that needs to be received, but I think this is a good start. It was very interesting this morning to be able to see this and discuss it, and so we will be taking further steps.
Oh, yeah, it looks great. I'm wondering if, I would assume that we have also considered the possibility of some alternative sources of funding, like contributions, contributions from corporations or classes from alumni groups and so on.
I think that'll be where the value of the task force really can come in, reaching out to those community groups. Correct.
You know, in regards to that, in our discussion this morning, there was a donors wall at the front entrance. I can show it to you if you want to talk about it afterwards, but that was one of the pictures that we did see.
Is there a legal? Land, if somebody wanted to name it.
As I recall, Hammer was a school board member that served for many, many years and was chairman for like 14 times or.
I don't see his name on the plaque, but I'll look into that. I'm not aware of any.
I'm not sure that the facility was named after the individual Hammer, but there was a school on the corner by Ridge Street. That could be too, but there was a school that was called Hammer School out there.
Have you attended?
No, I did not. I had a one-room schoolhouse out in the prairie someplace.
That may be something that we look into, because I know that, you know, if you go, the city calls their complex Hammer also, so there's got to be some kind of history behind that. Okay, I guess we'll continue to proceed, and as time goes on, thank you for your report and your time. Next, we have 9.2 is a high school athletic code violation discussion. This is something that I was talking to Neil earlier this week on something, and he brought it up. Right now, as a district, we are tougher than the Minnesota State High School League. And Afton, did you ever anything to report on that at all, or just?
I'm here to answer questions.
Okay.
Yep, if there's anything to be.
Because I think it's important that we look at what the Minnesota High School League is and what we are. And, you know, the question is, are we doing more harm than good to students by taking them away from something that they value? And I thought the timing was good, that we should take a look at this again, because I think I was on the board the last time when we made it tougher. And I might have a different opinion today than I had back then. And so the purpose here is maybe some discussion, but we want to give board members time to be able to talk to people, to research. And so this is not an action item this evening. So I don't know if anybody has any initial comments that they would like to make.
Yeah, sure. As you said, I called you earlier this week, and you laid it out pretty well. The initial movement towards more strict consequences for violations, specifically substance abuse violations, were put into effect with the best interest of the student athletes in mind, and I know other Big 9 schools took that step to make their consequences more strict than high school league ones, with the idea that it would serve as a deterrent, and the result would be that there would be more students that continued involvement in athletics and in those activities. I believe that the evidence would suggest, or the experience would suggest, that that was not the case. And in fact, if we have the best interest of the student athlete in mind, we will not present some consequence that separates them from involvement in the activity, where hopefully they will receive some instruction and some encouragement in avoiding those habits. Whereas as it is now, the consequences are so bad that a lot of students just, they don't come back. And so we lose them. So we don't have an opportunity to present the guidance that we might otherwise present. And all of this, by the way, is predicated with the assumption that we are administering our athletic activities in a proper way. And I've had long conversations with Mark and with Afton on this, and I think we're pretty much on the same page. These activities are an extension of the educational process. If they're not an extension of that process, then why are we including them as an activity of our school district? I think they're very important. I don't think that these activities are important because I've been a coach for 50 years. I've been a coach for 50 years because I think they're important. And I repeat that we really cannot take advantage of the opportunity to extend an educational experience to students if we boot them out of the system, and that's what's happening.
Afton, do you have some additional information for us?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments, and I would be happy to fill you in further on exactly what we're looking at. As a school district, we're a member school of the Minnesota State High School League. What the State High School League sets for us are minimal requirements. And so as a member school, we are open and able to base our policies and our bylaws and our handbooks for our students based on what our community needs are. And I think that is really important to look at too, is specifically, what are our community needs? And I know Jill and I sit on a committee together that we talk about what can our community do to eliminate and to help and provide tools for our students to avoid substance abuse. So I think it's really important when we look at those things too, is I know you said that it may scare people away, and I do have to personally say in the 3 years that I've been here is I haven't had a student drop out of a sport at this point due to a chemical violation. Not to say that there are students who've maybe had chemical violations that maybe didn't continue sports, but I don't have those records. But what I am able to say too is that I'm very fortunate to work with so many coaches who are also educators in our school system. And we've had this conversation numerous times, and actually just within the last couple months, this has been a hot topic for us because we know it's a community problem, we know it's a school problem, and we want to be those assets to our students to provide those tools to make better decisions. And I personally take pride in having that task as an activities director. Is I get to have those students come in and sit in my office, and we get to talk about these things. And we know mistakes happen, but we also know with mistakes there's consequences too. And it's very important that the students understand that is these are consequences, and they may seem extreme, but during these times of consequences, they have support systems that are there. They're not kicked out of their programs by any means. It is actually a requirement for our students to continue to practice with our team. They're there, they play a very important role. Their role is just adjusted for that time that they're having to sit out of those competitions. We also have students who are able to experience other activities because of having to serve a chemical violation. Those students are able to go out for different sports that maybe they wouldn't before. Sometimes we question if that's the best for other programs, but our coaches have expressed too that, you know what, it brings them other students, and they're showing them an activity that maybe they weren't going to experience before. So there is value to it, and we do understand that it is a subject that's touchy because districts, member schools of the State High School League do have varying penalties for chemicals, for academics, to compare us to different communities, yes, we can do that. But I think primarily, though, we need to look internally on what our students do need. And I think providing them with that guidance and those tools when these mistakes happen is very important. And we're still providing them with that experience in athletics and surrounded by people who are going to be there to assist them throughout the process, too. So the league violation, and I'm just going to read it straight out. The league violation for a first offense, and there are two different categories. There's a category that's specifically just athletics, and there's a category that's for fine arts and activities, because we know that both of those are very important, and it's not just athletics. We hold our students accountable in fine arts and activities as well. First violation for the State High School League is that the student shall lose eligibility for 2 consecutive interscholastic contests or 2 weeks, whichever is greater. Right now, our current district policy is for the first violation is that the student will lose 50% of the scheduled events for the activity in which they participate. We've strictly put a percentage because when we look at different sports, football plays 8 games, dance team has very minimal competitions. Basketball teams, hockey teams play 25, 26 games throughout the season. So by just putting a label on events can be very unequal. And so the percentage we feel is the best way to create equity between the programs and the kids is having to serve those chemical violations. And it may not just be chemical violations, it may be other things too. So that is the difference right now for the first violation between the State High School League and our district policy. And then it will continue for the State High School League. The second violation will move up to 4 weeks, and then it will go to 6 weeks. And for our chemical violations, for second violation, they lose a full calendar year. However, they do have the option to choose an alternate penalty, which would bring them back down to a 50% of the season. But we also then do require community service hours, and it's an opportunity for our students to go out there and to experience things that they may not, and whether that's working with a youth program for their sport, working at their church, working at a different community center. Those are just options, again, that we're getting our students out there and focusing on helping others. And for a third violation for our school, they actually do lose eligibility for further participation until they were to enroll in a chemical dependency program. So that's just a brief outlook. I'm sorry, after the third?
Yeah, you enroll in the program, then what?
After they successfully complete a chemical dependency program, they are able to return to participation, but they do have to serve 1 calendar year still, no matter what.
Okay, so we're 50% 1 year chemical. What is the State High School League? 2 weeks. What's their second one?
For the State High School League?
Yeah.
Yep, 6 weeks for, I'm sorry, I misspoke on that one. 6 weeks for the State High School League for your second. And the third would be 12 consecutive interscholastic contests or 4 weeks.
12 or 4? 12 contests.
12 contests or 4 weeks, whichever is longer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any questions?
I have some strong thoughts about that. So to me, this is just another move to move us to the average. I think that our rules should be stronger than they are right now and not go the other way. these athletes sign a contract, and they know what they're signing up for, and they know that there's consequences. And now what we're gonna say is, well, there aren't really consequences. And then what happens is that I hire them 8 years later, and I say, here's a contract, here's what you have to do to work, and if you do these things, I'm gonna have to fire you. What I don't wanna hear is, well, in high school, I didn't learn that. And I'm not coaching the district, but I've lived with a coach that was in the district for 9 years. And these are difficult situations when these happen. But again, the parents and the athlete know what the rules are, and the child violates the rules, there has to be consequences. And to me, by the time you get to a third offense, you're no longer an athlete, you have a drug problem. Because this is the third offense you've gotten caught at, not the third time you've done something. And so this is not an athlete I want out on the basketball court or the football field with my son when this other guy's high. So this just to me is adding to the problem of bringing us to mediocrity, bringing us back to the average. I think that we should increase and enforce the strictness of these rules.
Well, we disagree on that one. There are consequences. The high school league has consequences, and it's the contract for involvement in these activities is through the high school league, and so it is their contract, and there are consequences. My point is that the high school league has suggested that they are presenting minimum consequences, and that school districts then have the latitude to innovate their own version of what those consequences should be in excess of that. And my point is that we need as an administration, as a coach and student and perhaps parents, be involved in a discussion when these violations occur, and they will suffer the consequences as prescribed by the high school league, which is the contract they signed. And they will also engage in another agreement that will dictate the extent to which they will be able to participate in the activity after they have committed a violation. And that's something which is subjective. I mean, every case is different. And there may be cases where the administration and the coach have, in lieu of the situation and the circumstances, might in fact affect a penalty which is consistent with what we're currently doing. But then there may be other instances where that's just out of line, and it's not in the best interest of the student to suffer anything more than the high school league consequence. And again, this whole concept is predicated on the idea that we are going to have in place a program, a plan that involves the administration, the coach, and you're right, we have some great coaches out there that are educators, that are responsible, and they recognize that, as you pointed out in that wonderful article you wrote in the newspaper a couple months ago. Our purpose in our athletic program is not to fill our trophy cases with championship trophies. It's to educate our students, and I see this as a wonderful opportunity to work with that student, the administration, the coach, the student, the parent, work with that individual, and enable them to discover that their habits are not in their best interest.
I would also disagree that it is a move toward mediocrity. I've worked with chemical dependency issues over 20 years, and as Afton said, have met in community groups focused on this area. And I guess a few thoughts that I have would be that many times, especially, well, people of all ages, even especially teens, I think, they do become disengaged from everything that has been important to them in their whole life. And anything, as we've been learning through all of our conferences that we've been attending, school board conferences, things like that, engagement is key to student success. And that success doesn't just happen in the classroom, it happens on the athletic field and team building. things like that. And the students have to remain engaged to be successful and productive. I believe that I believe that these stronger standards were put in place with good intention, but I don't know that they're achieving the intention for which they were indicated at first. And a thought just came to me as we were looking at this right now. I wondered what the academic eligibility piece was, so I just glanced at that. And if a student is failing that, then they only have to miss 2 weeks or 2 contests. So I find that's a little bit of a discrepancy that we have that standard for academics, and then we take chemical issues to a different place, and I do realize they are different issues, but I believe both of these are opportunities to work with the student for betterment of their decision-making, of coping skills, of other things that are factoring in. And I think a lot of times, too, the irony that someone is sitting out of a season and knowing that others maybe are still playing, they just haven't been caught yet, I think adds to the frustration that comes along with that, building on all of the other things that the teens are experiencing. So I would be in support of looking into something that would lead to increased student engagement in good functional things in their life, which would include athletics.
Couple of things, Afton. First of all, do they also sign a contract with Albert Lee? So there's 2 kinds, not just MSHSL contract, there's 2. And the second thing, engagement, didn't you also mention they're supposed to be a practice every day?
That is a
So
requirement.
they still have to be there. If not, then they've removed themselves from the program?
Correct. They don't fulfill an ineligibility unless they complete a season in good standing.
Okay.
There we go. I personally do like this policy. And I do like for I work with students with emotional behavior disorders, so consistency. So I don't really want to see anything that has wiggle room, because then it's like, oh, you favored this kid over this. And maybe there was a special circumstances, but it's so hard to judge that. I like consistency. The other thing is that I like for the second violation that there's another option. You know what I mean? Like you can do community services, which is a great thing, or you can go to a chemical education project. You know what I mean? I think those are good things, and I think that's a nice option for that second violation. The only thing, I'm not too adverse to it, but this third violation, my only question or what concern would be is, my understanding is if they complete a chemical dependency program, then they're still out for a year. My only, if a change was going to be made, I do recognize, these are poor choices. I do recognize that addiction is also a disease. So if someone were to complete a chemical dependency program, that if we were going to change anything, that'd be one thing that maybe that they could rejoin a little sooner because they went through the work to heal themselves and become better. But otherwise, I like it pretty much. I was never an athlete. My son takes after me, unfortunately. Hopefully he can get some of his dad's athleticism. But I know in college so I don't have much perspective on this from that realm, but I know in college 2 of my roommates were athletes in high school. And I know that both of them never drank, never tried drugs, never smoked. Why? Because they didn't want to be ineligible for sports. And I don't know how strict their school policy was, but I know that they made good choices in high school because of that. And I'm sure clearly not everyone is making those good choices, but I'm hoping that some would make those good choices just based on that, or they have that first violation, then, hey, I'm not going to do anything else because I do not want to be ineligible for sports. So I guess that's my take on it.
I just want to maybe clarify, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. We have consequences we're talking about and engagement, and they can both be present. You can have really good engagement and strict consequences. I don't think we have to give up one for the other.
Just one thought, it occurred to me that Other Big Nine schools have gone down this road, and the only two that I know about specifically are the Rochester schools and Otana. And I think they went to stricter consequences and have subsequently come back to the high school league consequences. I'm not absolutely certain of that, but I'm pretty sure.
That's correct.
And, yeah, Afton, you'd know more about that.
You know what, I haven't been able to get a really valid answer on that one. I have reached out to all of our Big Nine schools. These are constant conversations that we have as Big Nine ADs, because we do want to be consistent within our conference to an extent. You know, some of the reasonings that we have gotten back is that maybe they just didn't see a difference. Not necessarily that research showed that there was more chemical use because of it, and people were dropping out of activities, but maybe that there just wasn't a change, and it was easier to handle and maintain if they were in line with Minnesota State High School League. I do want to point out that this is a conversation, again, that we've had with our coaching staff here, and you know, I can't say 100%, but I would say probably about 80% of our head coaches are very much in favor of our current policy right now, and I think we need to look beyond of just a policy that we're putting out for our students. I think this is a great opportunity, and that our coaches have really taken on as this is their teachable moments and their learning moments, and our coaches who are educators also take these opportunities to talk about these things before they happen. And so, you know, they're not reacting to things once they happen. They're definitely talking about it prior to. They're educating them. They're using the resources that they have to make sure that students are fully aware of, you know, not only is there a consequence of playtime, but we have to look at the whole scope of, you know, what do these actions cause to them personally. It's going to cut down on their academic performance. It's going to cut down on team unity, the respect that they get from teammates. There's a lot that kids are held accountable for, and so our coaches are really taking this under their wing, and they're helping educate our students so that we're not making those choices to begin with.
How long have these standards been in practice?
We don't know when the school board approved this.
Before I got here. We've never talked about it since I've been here.
It was during my last time on the school board. I don't know what year it was, but it was.
That would have been
it was a
my
few.
first time on the school board, so
Yeah.
probably about 12 years, 10 to 12 years. So we should have some data available, and I don't know that the data would reflect that use has decreased, or that, you know, the converse has happened, that there are, you know, more sober student athletes now than there were then. I wonder what data we could find to help support one way or the other, because, you know, engagement falls along a lot of different avenues, and just for saying that a student has to be present for meetings is not the same as being an active playing member of a team, and that may impact whether or not they, you know, maybe they don't drop out in a year if you haven't seen any dropout in a year, but maybe they don't come back the next year. And then what happens to their life? You know, a lot of times if they fall off the map in a lot of ways, but I believe whatever contract they are signing at the beginning of the year is what they do need to be held accountable to, but we need to have the best contract at the beginning of the year that will be for their best functioning, their highest function as an all-around person.
As you can see, there's a little bit of disagreement possibly here.
Can, I think one of the students.
Sorry.
If I could just put in my own, I would say that I would agree with the harsher consequences, really, because often when it's chemical abuse or something like that, it's not just that area that person is involved in, stuff like that. It often influences other athletes and can just really inflect in that position as well. So I think that it might be helpful to have those harsher consequences so it can remove them from what might otherwise be a bad situation for other kids too.
Okay, any other comments?
It's my understanding in talking to people from Rochester and Otana that they went back to the high school league contract because they hadn't noticed any difference in their consequence, as a result of their consequences. And in response to Gigi, again, it so much depends on how the coach, especially the coach, handles the situation. And an enlightened coach, and I would like to think that we have enlightened coaches, can actually use someone who has an issue like this in a positive way, and can embrace the other team members to assist in reconstructing this person. There are a lot of possibilities that are present if that student is still there, and I know, it's been stated that they're going to be there anyway, but it's been my experience that hasn't been the case. And if they're not there, you forego all of those possibilities.
Okay, I guess my thoughts are that maybe we need something between the high school league and where we're at today. And I guess I'm leaning towards the first offense being somewhat lenient. But after that, I think the consequences definitely need to increase. But I guess what I would like, Afton, if you could give us somewhat of a comparison to other Big Nine schools, and also maybe the Big Nine, or the Minnesota State High School League, and where we're at today, so if we had a comparison so that we could possibly make some decisions. And it'll give us time to gather more information as a group.
A procedural, I mean, I think we're discussing this as a board, and this is great feedback, but really this is an administrative rule that we're implementing, okay? And I know you talked about how you approved it at the board level previously. I just caution the board that we start creating rules at the board level, we are going to get into a slippery slope. And so what I propose to you is that we sit down with Afton and Mark and the coaches and people who are going to be impacted by this, and we come back with a proposal to the board saying, here's what the Big Nine's doing, here's what the State High School League rule is, here's what we propose moving forward, and I think then we go forth and do it. If we're going to, just from a policy implementation level, diving into a handbook issue, because my concern is, is the next issue going to be, all right, what's our consequence for kids caught in the parking lot smoking at the high school? Are we going to start talking about that at the board level? So that is my thought, and I know that it was probably done differently before, but I think Afton said it great, and I think somebody else did here at the board table, and that is, and this is why I think this is a great discussion, this is community values, and that's what the board is about, is what our community values are on this issue. But I think that, there are different values in play here, and I think it's a great discussion that we're having. But I don't know if we need a formal vote from the board to approve one thing or the other. I think we bring it to you and say, based upon your input, what do you think? So that's my thoughts on it.
Could I just ask a question, Afton? What do you mean by going to a different sport?
Yeah, so to serve in an eligibility, that they do have to compete in a sport. And so if someone does not play all 3 seasons on a typical basis, they may choose to go out for a sport that they have not participated in before, and they would be able to serve their ineligibility sooner. So that's where the discussion that I've had with my head coaches is that in a way you could almost look at that as a negative thing, that a coach may be afraid that that student is only participating in their sport just to serve an ineligibility. But we've also actually had some great success stories too, is that these students are participating in sports that they haven't participated in before, but they are doing it with the first intention is to serve an ineligibility, but then later to find out that they had a great time. They had a great experience, and that is probably a sport that they would continue to play. So that's what I mean by a new sport.
And I guess I'm not understanding so to serve an ineligibility, is that what you mean by, say, someone was in, I'll throw out tennis. So someone was in tennis, had a violation early in the year, and then had to sit out the half time, but they still need to be there at all the practices. They can switch to a different sport during
So
that?
I'll give an example. So our policy is that this is year-round. 365 days, doesn't matter where they're at, is that they are signing off their contract saying that they will not participate in use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. So if this happens during the summer and our student doesn't play a sport until winter, they will choose to participate in a fall sport, and then they would be eligible fully in the winter then because they served that ineligibility during the fall. And I will say, you know, again, I think it's great discussion, and it's not the first discussion we've had as a staff. But I do think about that, you know, we sign a contract, and our code of responsibilities for our student athletes is to be law-abiding. And it really does come down to that this is a law issue, and it is a severity thing too. And I know we talk about academics, and academics is first and foremost. And that's why we do have a lesser, because we don't want those academics to be in their way of participating in extracurricular activities, because we do know that kids struggle. But we give them that opportunity, again, to have those tools, to work with our coaches, to work with our staff, to be able to get those grades up, because that is first and foremost. And I would be nervous if we were to now backtrack. What is that going to be perceived by our community? Maybe not all, but some of them, is that now we're lessening a penalty for someone who is not law-abiding, and that's first and foremost what we want our students to be doing with their experiences here.
Academics are certainly important, but I don't ever recall someone being precluded from my geometry class because they had a substance use violation. I see it at maybe a ridiculous comparison, but still, I think, as I said, I've coached for 50 years because I think extracurricular activities are an integral part of an educational program. And again, I believe that if we impose penalties that discourage a student from being involved, we're not taking advantage of a wonderful opportunity to change their habits.
You know, one of the areas that we have, for example, in the high school handbook, if a kid is caught, there's a fight, okay? We used to have language that said 5 days, okay? Now we have language that says up to 5 days, because it provides the administrator the ability to use their professional judgment to look at the situation.
And that's exactly my point. I would not be opposed to something like that, but to just categorically say that on the first offense, someone is not going to participate for half the season, that just seems to me to be a bit extreme, and to remove that student from, or possibly remove that student from an opportunity to have some guidance that might improve his habits.
The concern on that is it puts a ton more weight on the activities director, because now they are weighing, okay, this kid's situation versus this kid's, and there are a lot of emotional factors involved when you are denying participation to a kid in maybe a basketball game or a wrestling match, much more than if you tell them they're going to have to miss geometry. Sorry.
You know, what Neil was saying, that students don't have to miss geometry because of chemical use. Sometimes they do. When they have to go to a treatment center, or they get sent away to a residential center, that this is kind of some steps for some students to nip it before it gets to that extreme. You know, I mean, yeah, you don't have a one violation and you get to miss or have to miss geometry. Of course, it'd be have to miss because they'd love to go to your class. But But there are cases where they can't come to school. You know what I mean? When it does get severe enough. I mean, it is true that, I mean, it does happen.
But many times then there are teachers in the recovery program, in the treatment program. Yep. Afton, why do Category 2 activities have something different than, and why, it's a little confusing because it says first violation, but there's nothing for second violation or third violation there.
Yeah, so category 2 activities, that would be like the musical. That would be, they're very, very unique. And so if, you know, you were to take, again, we have maybe 2 performances. And so it is the length of the season that's really looked at for fine arts. For fine arts and activities, it is basically because those activities just don't take place very often. So by them missing one contest for that, it would be basically a 50% of their season. So again, looking at the equity within their activity and their program, with the length of time that they would be missing.
So for choir, for example, I don't know.
So choir for school does not count. That is an academic class. So choir concerts and band concerts, those do not count in our category 2. We're only talking about show choir, the musical, the spring play, those activities that are outside of the curricular. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've had a lot of discussion, and I guess Dr. Funk has said that they would like to come with a policy. I know that we have done it in the past. I certainly don't want to get into other policies, but I would also say that my question to you is, do you want to let our staff come with the policy, or do we as a board want to be involved? And I would say this would be the only one that we would ever want to be involved in.
So is it an actual policy, or is it just the handbook itself?
It's a rule within the handbook, the activities handbook.
I probably don't know the difference, and I'm completely showing my ignorance. But it's a policy, though, too, right? It's like a student policy.
They may call it that, but it's with, the handbooks have rules. You have the umbrella district policies, okay? It's not a district policy because
Okay.
it's specific to this building or these sports.
Okay.
That's the difference.
All right, see,
Yep.
showing my ignorance.
It's language within our handbook. So,
Okay.
you know, board approval of any changes that are in our handbook, but what's involved in the handbook is not particularly individual policies.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
So my question again is, do you want the district to make the decision, or do we want board involvement? And if we, again, my recommendation is that if we do have the board involved, that it's only on this policy and not other things. So I'm not sure that's good or bad. Okay?
I think it's best to be consistent in the things that we do approve. So if we do, like I know we have the nonviolence policy, but since it is in a handbook and we do see handbooks in each of the schools and things like that, it just seems more consistent to me if we stick to policy. And if we needed to pull that out and create a policy, then that would be fine. But I think it's hard to say we'll just do this one piece.
And we'll bring back something that I'm hopeful that the board can get some consensus around.
Okay. Good discussion. Thank you, everyone. And next we'll move on to a resolution establishing the combined polling places, and Lori Volz.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk, for your consideration is a resolution for approval that establishes our combined polling places. This is for the purpose of a situation when we would have an election that is not part of the statewide election. So an off-cycle election, such as a special election. What's new coming forward is in 2017, the legislation changed regarding this particular requirement. And so starting now up through the future, each year, the board will have to annually approve these combined polling places for your school district and standalone elections. So this is the first time in a while. I looked back, I think it was 2007 or something like that, that the last time that the board approved the polling locations for a standalone election. And so what we're bringing to you tonight is tweaking our polling locations. Currently, we had 6, I think we're increasing it to 9. Inside the city limits, we're mirroring what the general election polling locations are. And then, so that's why there are some additional polling locations compared to the last time we held an off-cycle election. But then in the smaller surrounding towns and townships, we're keeping our previously identified polling locations the same. So just to clarify that, this reflects a little bit of a change from our last time that we had an election on an standalone election.
So this will become an annual requirement?
That is correct. So annually, we'll be approving this.
So can we approve next year's as part, or the following year's as part of our annual meeting in January?
I did ask that question, and yes, we just have to make sure it's stated correctly.
Okay.
What calendar year it's for.
So what I would suggest that I would recommend we approve this one tonight, and you'll see something very similar to this, and then in January as part of our reorganization meeting when we approve where banks are and other things, so that we just put it in the annual cycle.
This would be these are elections the district pays for, right?
Correct. So these are standalone elections. So that's where we have our own election judges, and we have our own polling locations, and we literally run the election ourselves. Like, for example, when we pass our operating referendum, that was a standalone election on an off-cycle. So the years that we have an election, such as a school board election that's on the statewide election, that's where our ballot question is with the county, long list of ballot questions. So again, this situation of these polling locations is in the case where we have a standalone election, which, you know, if we have a special election regarding Hammerfield, for example, that's when we'd be using. For the, like what I'm proposing here to the board is to mirror within the city limits, the same polling location as is used in the general election. But for the smaller communities, we have combined them because there are a lot of polling locations, and just, it is a lot to manage when it's just us running our own election. In my previous experience with other school districts, it's very common where we combine some polling places when it's an off-cycle election, a standalone election.
I'm just wondering, within the city limits, why we don't cut it. I mean, because every one costs the district, the taxpayers, money.
Right. Well, I'm sure that's why currently it had been, up to this point, it had been fewer polling locations. But I also can tell you in my experience, it does add confusion. And it's just, you know, the volume of voters, where if they're used to going to a certain location within the city limits to vote for the general election, but then for our own standalone election, we're not using the same locations, the public does get confused.
It does a couple things. One is confusion, 2 is mistrust. Okay, so if we're going out for an election and we're trying to get Hammerfield on, or we're raising taxes because we need an operating levy, oh, wait a minute, you're trying to trick us because I don't get to vote where I normally vote, now you're making it harder for me to vote. And so, I can tell you there was a district just up 35 from us a few years ago who collapsed down to 2 polling locations, and they had huge lines out the door, and people were all confused as far as where they were supposed to vote, and they just took a beating because how you really were trying to take advantage of by doing this. But so we are trying to replicate as closely as possible what it looks like for a general election. There is a cost, but the trust factor and confusion are, I think in this case, are worth it. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's, trust is big in any voting situation. So this is an action item. Now, one question I do have, though, is, so we're going to vote on this now, so is this for 18? Okay, and then,
If we come back in January, then we would do it for 19.
okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. I
Because we have to
understood.
do it in the calendar year, sometime in the calendar year before the election, or before the polling places go into place. And now it's an annual procedural requirement.
Okay, and entertain a motion.
I move in support of the resolution.
Okay, is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Question, I do like the additional polling places, so we don't disenfranchise voters. But when it says combined polling places, does that mean like if I showed up to a different place in Albert Lea than where I'm usually go, could I still vote there, or I have to, okay.
You have to go to the specifically designated locations depending on what ward you live in.
Okay, so even
Or
more
township.
important to keep more so we don't get confused, or as I could show up in the wrong place. Okay, thank you.
And I'd still vote in Hayward.
No, we're switching to Allendale now.
I'm against.
This is a roll call vote, I see. So, although, I guess we'll start with Neil.
Aye.
Jill? Aye. Dave?
Aye.
I'll say aye. Okay. Motion unanimously passes. We have no other item on our agenda. I just wanted to say in closing, we're coming to the end of 2017, and I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and thanks to everyone for what I feel has been a good year, so thank you.
I just wanted to, from one of the consent items, I didn't realize it was on there. 6.12, I wanted to withdraw my vote, just since it's a conflict of interest. So, I just didn't know, so I wanted Ashley or whoever just make note of that.
Do we need to pull that item out of a consent item then and vote separately on it, I would think?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
which one?
1612.
Para-contract.
The bottom one.
Okay,
No glasses tonight.
all right. So,
So we'll add
Be-
612 to the end of the agenda, and then do we have a motion to,
okay. Is there a motion to approve 6.12 or 612? Okay. Okay, is there a motion to pull it out? Okay, is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving on 6.12, the para-educator contract, signify by saying aye. Aye.
removing it?
Right. Okay, all in favor of that, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, now we got to vote on it. Okay? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve 6.12.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the paraeducator master agreement signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries.
I abstained earlier, yeah. Yep.
So you can't vote. Okay.
Yes. We are done. Good work, Jim. Jim.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Meeting is adjourned.